This video tries to resolve some problems with World Athletics' new recommendations for eligibility for the female category in athletics. In particular, the new recommendations contradict themselves when describing who is eligible for the female category, and state that there's only a need to have a female category in elite sport, rather than at all levels of sport. I try to clarify World Athletics' position, arguing that only people who have never had testicular tissue that produces testosterone to which they are sensitive should be eligible for the female category, and that there should be female championships held at all levels of sport. In February 2025, World Athletics released a consultation document announcing their intention to introduce a cheek swab test to confirm an athlete's sex, to ensure that the athlete is eligible to compete in the female category. Previously, they had allowed male athletes to become eligible for the female category if they suppressed their blood testosterone levels for a long enough period of time. However, scientific research into the effects of testosterone suppression showed that the around 12% boost in performance enjoyed by male athletes following exposure to testosterone as they grow up is not eliminated following testosterone suppression. Consequently, World Athletics no longer allow males who are sensitive to testosterone to compete in the female category. This applies both to male athletes who identify as women and to athletes with differences of sex development. Instead, athletes wishing to compete in the female category will need to take a test to confirm that they are female. This test will be a cheek swab test to check for the presence of the SRY gene, the sex-determining region on the Y chromosome. World Athletics is aware that the absence of the SRY gene does not align perfectly with the female biological sex, but it does in the vast majority of cases, and they allow for further testing in the very small number of cases where it does not. This is a very welcome development. Basing eligibility for the female category on recent testosterone levels or on self-identification has produced all sorts of problems. Even so, the recommendations in the consultation document released in early February 2025 still have some significant problems that need ironing out. I want to discuss two problems in particular. Firstly, the recommendations state that having a category only for females is important in elite sport, but not at non-elite or recreational levels of sport. I think this is wrong. Championship sport using a female category should be organized at all levels of sport. Secondly, the recommendations contradict themselves. They say that eligibility for its female category is restricted to athletes whose biological sex is female, and that athletes whose biological sex is male should be ineligible for competition in its female category unless they are completely insensitive to androgens. As the athletes with complete androgen insensitivity syndrome are male, not female, the female category is supposed to be for females only and supposed to allow some males into it, which is a contradiction. This gives the impression that World Athletics do not have a clear, principled reason for maintaining a female category, and instead are allowing people into the category based on subjective prejudices about who is female enough to be eligible. I think there are clear, principled reasons for the female category, but World Athletics needs to be explicit about what fairness means in the contests they organize, and about the reasons for having a female category. I address both of these concerns here. So, World Athletics' new recommendations say the aspect of the sport of athletics that is elite competition properly draws lines on the basis of biological sex. But the sport as a whole, for example at the non-elite and recreational levels, has a place for everyone. World Athletics do not recommend that college level, school level, or regional level athletics have a strictly enforced female category. Lots of people are going to see this as unacceptable. For example, Mara Yamauchi, a former Olympic marathon runner, has argued that women and girls deserve fair and safe sport at all levels, not just at elite level, and that in order for females of all those ages and abilities to have fair and safe sport, there must be zero males in the female category. I think the failure to recognize the importance of the integrity of the female category at all levels of sport stems from the failure to recognize that there are different sorts of sporting contest, with different ways of understanding what is fair, and where and when these different sorts of contest can be found. On the one hand, there are championship contests. These are contests to find the best athletes. If we want the best athletes to win, the thing that the athletes do, the event, needs to be the same for everyone in the competition. It's no good if some sprinters competing in the same race run 100 meters to the finish line, but others run 110 meters or 90 meters. If we want to find out who's the fastest runner, then all athletes had better run the same distance. Similarly, if we want to know who can throw a discus the furthest, the discus that all athletes throw had better be the same size and weight. Unless the event is the same for all competitors, in which the rules are the same for everyone and performance is evaluated in the same way for everyone, the competition will not tell us who is best at the event. This sounds obvious, but there are other forms of contest for which this is not true. For example, there are also handicap contests, whose objective is not to find out which athlete is the best, but rather to produce a close contest. So, in handicap horse racing, faster horses may be made to carry heavier loads, so that the outcome of the race is less predictable. In golf, ladies play off tees that are closer to the hole, and golfers can add or subtract a particular number of strokes to their score depending on how good they are. This is equivalent to giving slower sprinters a head start or asking better throwers to throw a heavier discus, so that the competition will be close. In this sort of contest, the event is not the same for everyone, and performance is not evaluated in the same way, because the objective is not to find the best athlete, but rather to have a close contest. These different sorts of contests adopt completely different ways of understanding fairness. In championship sport, a fair contest is one in which all athletes perform the same event, scored in the same way, under the same rules, so that the best athlete will win. Restricting or enhancing the performance of an athlete relative to others is unfair in championship sport. In handicap sport, by contrast, it is failing to restrict or enhance the performance of athletes with different abilities that is unfair, because here a fair contest is a close contest. There are a few different types of handicap contest. Some take matching athlete performance as fair. Others see matching potential performance as fair, so that athletes who train the most effectively will win. Others see eliminating a particular disadvantage as fair. So, Oscar Pistorius might have been allowed to use special prosthetic legs that other athletes were not to compensate for his disability. But we don't need to worry about these different kinds of handicap contest here. Here, I'll only worry about handicapping to match performance so that contests are close. Both handicap sport and championship sport use categories, but they do so for very different reasons. Handicap sport uses categories to keep contests close. As in most athletic events, the best males and even the sub-elite males are better than the best women, a handicap contest may use a female category to prevent those males from competing with the best women, giving the best women a chance to win. Notice that in a handicap sport, you don't strictly need an exclusively female category. You just need to make sure that the athletes have the same level of ability. You could theoretically allow lower level or well handicapped male athletes into the female category and have a fair contest. But in championship sport, the female category exists for a completely different reason. Not all humans have the same organs. In particular, some have testicles and some do not. The testicles produce a large amount of testosterone, which shapes athletic ability significantly. People with and without testicles have different bodies, and some people want to know how these different sorts of body can perform athletically. So, we organize contests to find out. How fast can a human who does not have and never had testicular tissue run 100 meters? How far can such a person throw a discus? How far can such a person jump? In order to answer questions like this, we have to exclude people who have or had testicular tissue in their bodies by forming a category for such people. Strictly, this category is for people who, at no point in their lives, have had testicular tissue that produces testosterone that is able to influence the development of their athletic body. As typically, these are female people, this category gets called the female category or the women's category. In championship sport, these are not performance categories or potential performance categories or categories for people who do not benefit from a particular advantage. They are categories for people with a certain sort of body. I don't think this distinction between handicap and championship sport has been recognized in world athletics policy, and this has prevented them from thinking clearly about where and when these different sorts of contests should be organized. Championship sport does not only happen at the elite level. People at all levels of sport, be this at national, regional, university, college, school, county, or whatever level, should be able to find out how good they are as athletes. This is important for making sure that athletes that have the potential to become elite can be identified and can enter pathways to develop their potential. But it's also important in and of itself. People should not be cut off from finding out how good they are at something just because they are not elite athletes. Championship contests for female athletes can and should be organized at all levels of sport. Similarly, handicap contests could involve elite athletes. A running club might be joined by an elite athlete or by an elite athlete in a wheelchair who may complete a marathon in a much faster time than anyone else at the club. A handicap contest might be organized that gives the club runners a half hour or an hour head start to see if the elite athlete can catch them. This might provide some good motivation for the club runners to train and see if they can beat the handicapped elite athletes. This might be a fun challenge for all involved. In such contests, the sex of the competitors might not be very important. Elite female distance runners are much faster than most male club runners and can perform this chasing function perfectly effectively. Handicap contests can involve athletes from all levels of sport. World Athletics, in advising that the female category is required in elite competition but not at lower levels of sport, seem to have missed this. They are responsible for organizing international championship contests, but it isn't clear in their recommendations whether they have championship or handicap sport in mind. They may think that all sport is handicap sport and that the women's category is a form of performance category that needs to exclude men to give females a chance to win. But at lower levels of sport, athletes of both sexes can compete together according to their level of ability. Or they may think that elite sport is a championship contest that uses both men's and women's categories, but that championship sport does not occur at lower levels of sport. Either way, they are wrong. The main point I want to make here is that championship contests for athletes with different sorts of body can and should be organized at all levels of sport. Handicap contests of various designs might be organized, and these may not need to use strict sex categorization. But always remember that championship and handicap contests are different and can be found at all levels of sport. Getting clear about the distinction between championship and handicap sport will also help World Athletics articulate a principled eligibility criteria for the female category and avoid contradicting themselves. The recommendations propose that World Athletics affirm both its long-standing design for a female category as a space where XX athletes can compete only against each other. This sounds like they see female XX athletes as a sort of athlete, a kind of athlete, whose athletic abilities are to be investigated in competition. This is what would happen in championship contests. And yet, they also say that the reason they no longer allow male athletes who suppress their testosterone into the female category is that it does not restrict performance sufficiently, which makes it seem as though World Athletics are organizing a handicap contest. If World Athletics Championships are championship contests for the sort of athlete that is female with two X chromosomes, then why allow androgen insensitive males with XY chromosomes and testicles to compete? If androgen insensitive males are allowed in because they derive no performance advantage from their testicular tissue, as would be the case in a handicap contest, why not allow lower level male athletes with other DSDs to compete in the female category as well? What sort of contest is this, and why does it need a female category? Who should be eligible for the female category, and why? World Athletics need to clarify this. It's fairly obvious that World Athletics are organizing a championship contest. World and Olympic champion athletes are the best athletes at different sorts of event. The reason to have the female category in a championship contest is because athletes have different types of body, and the contest investigates what people with these different sorts of body can do. Which sort of body is eligible for the female category? Well, if people with complete androgen insensitivity syndrome are eligible for the female category, as world athletics allow, then eligibility for the female category is not about being female. Some people with CAIS have testicles, XY chromosomes, and are male, and yet are eligible for the female category. This is because they have bodies that are completely unresponsive to the high levels of testosterone made by their testicles, and that develop in the female typical way. But eligibility is not just about responsiveness to high levels of testosterone. People with polycystic ovarian syndrome have higher than normal levels of testosterone for a female, and their bodies are normally sensitive to that testosterone. And yet they are eligible for the female category according to World Athletics 2023 guidance. If this was a handicap contest that sought to eliminate physiological advantages from competition, then this might not make much sense. But this is a championship contest, in which winners should be exceptional athletes. It is unusual for someone with no testicular tissue to have testosterone levels so high. If a person with PCOS benefits from this high testosterone in sport, then they have exceptional athletic physiology. For someone with the kind of body that does not have testicles, they are an exceptional athlete. However, it is not exceptional for someone with testicular tissue to have testosterone levels that high. If people with testicles benefit from having testosterone levels this high, there's nothing exceptional about that. Using categories defined by the presence of testicular tissue allows us to find the most exceptional athletes with the kinds of body that have testicular tissue and that do not have testicular tissue. It is not just the responsiveness to testosterone that is important for eligibility, but its source. I suggest that in sport, the important thing is to have a category for people whose bodies have never had testicular tissue that produces testosterone to which they are sensitive. This is what should be used to define the female category. This isn't quite the same as having a category for people with two X chromosomes, no SRY gene, or for people who are female. For one thing, having two X chromosomes does not strictly align with being female. The vast majority of the time it does, but not always, and these exceptions should be considered if good policy is to be developed. For example, there are a small number of males with testes who have two X chromosomes, no Y chromosome, and no SRY gene. And yet, they should not be eligible for the female category because they have testicular tissue that makes at least some testosterone to which they are responsive. There are also people with chimerism or mosaicism, whose cells have different sex chromosomes. Some cells from the same person can have two X chromosomes, whilst other cells can have a Y chromosome. Some of these people are female in that they have ovaries and no testicular tissue. These cases are very rare, but they could well have turned up in athletic contests historically, so policy needs to consider them. Such people may well have Y chromosomes and SRY genes in their cheek cells, but if they have no testicular tissue, they should be eligible for the female category. Also, some females have a combination of ovarian and testicular tissue in their gonads. The testicular tissue produces testosterone, and their body is sensitive to it. Some of these people have a Y chromosome, but some do not. The people that do not have a Y chromosome or a SRY gene should not be eligible for the female category, even though they are certainly female, in that their ovaries make eggs and the testicular tissue they have does not produce sperm. Policy needs to consider how it would handle such cases. As I've suggested, in sport, the important thing is to have a category for people whose bodies have never had testicular tissue that produces testosterone to which they are sensitive. This is the athletically relevant aspect of human physiology. Some males with complete androgen insensitivity syndrome are eligible for such a category. Some females with overtesticular disorder are not. Paradoxically, sex testing should not be thought of as a test for biological sex, but rather as a test for androgen-producing testicular tissue. A cheek swab used to test for the SRI gene is a very good test for androgen producing testicular tissue, especially when combined with testosterone levels, but World Athletics policy should state the proper target of the test explicitly. The cases that have drawn so much attention of late in athletics and in boxing have been athletes with a condition called 5-alpha reductase deficiency. These athletes have testes that produce testosterone to which they are sensitive, but they can also have female appearing external genitalia. They should not be eligible for the female category, not because they're not female, but rather because they have or had androgen producing testicular tissue to which their bodies are sensitive. So, World Athletics should amend their eligibility policy for the female category to clarify that they are organizing championship contests for athletes who do not have and never had testicular tissue that produces testosterone to which their body is sensitive. This should be the basis for a clear and principled policy which does not contradict itself. They should also state that championship contests should be organized at all levels of sport, not just in elite contests.